Imagine an innocent child filled with life, laughter, and boundless curiosity, suddenly taken away in the most senseless and horrifying way imaginable. Picture a home that should be a place of safety, turning into a scene of chaos and irreversible devastation. On January 20th, 2025, in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, a tragedy unfolded that no family should ever endure. 8-year-old Michael Meager had no idea that the man he trusted as a father figure would be the very one to take his life in a reckless act of carelessness. Stephen D. Merkel Jr., his stepfather, might have wanted to impress the young boy. He reached for his gun, a weapon that should have remained locked away. A moment of misguided arrogance led to a fatal mistake. A single gunshot rang out in the quiet of the night. Michael collapsed, his innocent life slipping away within seconds. This is the heartbreaking story of a boy who had his entire future ahead of him. A story of loss, recklessness, and the devastating consequences of one careless decision. This is the story of how Michael Meager met his untimely fate. Michael Meager was not just any child. He was the kind of boy who radiated joy, whose laughter could fill a room, and whose kindness was effortless. At just 8 years old, he had an infectious energy that made people gravitate toward him. Every morning, Michael woke up before the alarm even went off, eager to start the day. He loved waffles for breakfast, always covering them with too much syrup and grinning at his messy plate. He would rush to get ready for school, making sure to grab his favorite Spider-Man backpack, because, in his mind, superheroes were real, and he was going to be one someday. When it was time to leave, he would hug his mom so tightly, as if he hadn't just seen her an hour ago. It was just who he was, loving, full of energy, ready to take on the world. He wasn't just another student at Brook Park Elementary School in LaGrange Park, Illinois. He was the one who made sure no one felt left out, the one who could turn an ordinary day into something special with his excitement and imagination. His teachers adored him, not just because he was a good student, but because he had a way of making school feel like a place of adventure. He had an innate curiosity about the world. He wanted to explore, to learn, to do things bigger than himself. His classmates remember him as the boy who always had a joke ready, a hand to help, or a creative idea that turned recess into a grand adventure. At home, Michael's world was filled with the kind of childhood magic that every child deserves. He was fascinated by superheroes. He loved the idea of saving the day, of being brave, of standing up for what was right. His imagination knew no limits. He built towering Lego structures, dreaming up entire worlds, his mind always racing with ideas for the next great thing he'd create. He wasn't just playful, he was deeply caring. He was the child who would stop playing just to check on a friend who had fallen, the one who would hug his mother tightly after school, as if he hadn't seen her in years. To his mother, he was her everything, her greatest joy, her little shadow, her reason to keep going no matter how hard life got. He was more than just a son. He was her heart walking outside her body. To his friends, he was the one who brought everyone together. He could make anyone laugh, even on the worst days. He was full of life, always the first to run outside when the sun was shining, always wanting to stay out a little longer, to squeeze the most out of every moment. He loved playing until the streetlights flickered on, until the night sky signaled that it was time to go home. But Michael never wanted the fun to end, because for him, the world was full of endless possibilities. And he had so many dreams. Michael talked about the things he would do when he grew up, the adventures he would go on, the places he would visit. He wanted to be someone who made a difference, even at his young age. He had no idea that his future, so bright, so full of promise, would be stolen from him in an instant. Michael Meager lived in what appeared to be a typical family home, a place where birthdays were celebrated, bedtime stories were read, and life moved forward in the way it does for many families. His mother had married Stephen D. Merkel Jr., a man who took on the role of stepfather, and from the outside they seemed like any other blended family, navigating the challenges of relationships, parenting, and daily life. Michael was a second grader at Brook Park Elementary School in LaGrange Park, Illinois. He was surrounded by classmates who adored him, teachers who saw his potential, and a school community that would never forget him. He was a bright, happy child, full of curiosity and boundless energy, the kind of boy who made friends easily and brought warmth wherever he went. At home, his world was simple, filled with play, laughter, and the comfort of his mother's love. Like most children his age, Michael trusted the adults in his life without question. He didn't think about danger, responsibility, or the consequences of reckless behavior. Why would he? The people around him were supposed to protect him. He was supposed to grow up, go on adventures, and dream about the future. But not all dangers come from the outside world. Sometimes the greatest risks exist within the home itself. Stephen D. Merkel Jr., 52 years old, was a legal gun owner. He owned multiple firearms and, by all appearances, seemed to consider himself knowledgeable about handling them. He told investigators that he believed he was a responsible gun owner. But responsibility isn't just about having a gun. It's about how you handle it, how you store it, and how seriously you take its power. Merkel's fascination with firearms was more than just casual interest. He legally owned multiple guns, and though the details of how often he handled them remain unclear, one fact is undeniable. His negligence would cost a child's life. Firearms are not toys. They are not props. They are lethal, and in the wrong hands, or in careless hands, they destroy lives. Michael had no reason to fear guns. He had no way of knowing that he should. To him, they were probably nothing more than objects, things that existed in movies and video games. He wasn't old enough to understand the gravity of what a single bullet could do. And that night, Merkel's failure to respect that reality would take everything away. That night, Michael wasn't in a war zone. He wasn't in a dangerous neighborhood. He wasn't in the path of a criminal. He was in his own home, a place that was supposed to be safe, a place where children are meant to be protected. There was no warning, no moment of fear leading up to it. Michael wasn't running from danger. He was standing right next to the man who was supposed to be responsible. Merkel made a decision that would change everything. He removed his 9mm handgun from its storage, a weapon designed to kill, and held it in his hands. Maybe he had done this before. Maybe he thought it was harmless. He pulled out the magazine, thinking that was enough. He didn't check the chamber. He didn't think. Michael, like any child, trusted the adults around him. He stood there unaware, completely vulnerable to the consequences of someone else's mistake. Then, in one reckless second, the gun went off. The sound exploded through the house, a deafening crack that shattered everything. Michael, just 8 years old, crumpled to the floor. Blood spread fast, soaking into the fabric of his clothes, pooling beneath him. A mother's worst nightmare had just become reality, and in that moment, nothing could be undone. Michael didn't have time to understand what had happened to him. He didn't get to say goodbye. 1 second he was standing there, the next he was gone. The difference between life and death was one bullet. 1 second of carelessness. One moment where someone who claimed to be responsible wasn't. Michael never got a second chance. He never got to run outside and play again. He never got to hug his mother one last time. His life ended in the very place where he should have been safest. And the man responsible? He didn't wake up that day thinking he would kill a child. But that's the reality of negligence. It doesn't take intention. It only takes one reckless decision. Michael should have had years ahead of him. He should have grown up, chased his dreams, and had the future he deserved. But that was stolen from him. And now, the world will never know who he could have become. A home that should have been a place of safety became the setting for an unimaginable tragedy. One moment of carelessness, and everything was gone. A boy who deserved a lifetime of love, of adventure, of chasing his dreams, stolen. A family who once felt whole, shattered. And a mother who would never wake up to the sound of her son's voice again. left to navigate a world that would never feel the same. It was an ordinary evening, or so it seemed. Michael was at home, feeling safe in his own surroundings, oblivious to the disaster about to unfold. It was well past midnight when Merkel decided to show off his firearms to Michael. Maybe he thought it would make him seem impressive. Maybe he thought a child would admire him more if he looked fearless with a weapon in his hands. Merkel retrieved his 9mm handgun and removed the magazine, believing the firearm was unloaded. However, he failed to check the chamber, where a bullet remained. At some point, he pulled the trigger, unintentionally discharging the firearm. The bullet struck Michael, who collapsed instantly. Maybe he wanted to demonstrate how tough or knowledgeable he was about weapons. In a horrifying split second, he pulled the trigger. A loud bang echoed through the house. Michael, just 8 years old, was struck. His small body collapsed onto the floor, the life draining out of him as blood pooled around him. The silence that followed was deafening. Panic, chaos, regret. Merkel stared in horror at what he had done. His hands trembled as he called 911, his voice cracking as he reported that he had accidentally shot his stepson. The dispatcher could hear the desperation in his tone, the realization of irreversible damage sinking in. Paramedics arrived swiftly, finding Michael unresponsive on the floor. When Michael's mother heard the shot, she thought, hoped, it was something else. A car backfiring, the TV, anything but what it really was. But then she saw him, her little boy crumpled on the floor, eyes wide in shock. She fell to her knees, screaming his name, shaking him, willing him to wake up. Blood was spreading across his tiny shirt, and as much as she wanted to believe he would open his eyes, deep down, she already knew. Her baby was gone. Neighbors would later say they had never heard such raw anguish before. Emergency responders worked frantically to stabilize Michael, but the bullet had done too much damage. Within minutes of reaching the hospital, the doctors pronounced him dead. A mother lost her son. A family was forever torn apart. And Merkel, the man who had vowed to protect Michael, had been the one to end his life. Law enforcement officers swarmed the house that night. The once peaceful home had become a crime scene, littered with evidence of a preventable tragedy. Merkel was immediately taken into custody, his earlier confidence now replaced with devastation and regret. During the interrogation, Merkel admitted to showing off his gun. He confessed that he had wanted to impress Michael. "I didn't mean to," he kept repeating. "I didn't think it would fire." Law enforcement officers arrived quickly, assessing the scene and gathering evidence. During questioning, Merkel admitted that he had shown Michael the gun, believing it was unloaded. The district attorney later charged him with first-degree reckless homicide, and he was booked into the Walworth County Jail. His legal case remains ongoing, with a trial expected in the future. The case has sparked renewed discussions on firearm safety and responsible gun ownership. How could a grown man, someone who owned multiple guns, be so careless? How could a child pay the price for one man's ego-driven mistake? His mom is devastated. "We can't bring Michael back," she said in one of her speeches, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "But we can stop this from happening to another child. We have to." Michael's family has been left devastated, and the tragedy has reignited conversations about gun safety. At his former school, a memorial was erected in his honor. A small, beautifully crafted plaque sat under a tree on the playground he once loved so much. It read, "In loving memory of Michael Meager, a bright light taken too soon. May his spirit live on in the laughter of children and the love of those who remember him." Children played around the tree, some of them too young to remember what had happened. But every year, on the anniversary of his death, teachers and students gathered to honor him, to share stories, and to remind everyone why safety and responsibility should never be taken for granted. As time passed, the wounds of Michael's loss did not heal, but they became something else, something that drove change, that inspired action, that made people pause and think before making a careless decision. And somewhere in the hearts of those who loved him, Michael's laughter still echoed. Michael's absence was everywhere, His mother would find herself setting an extra plate at dinner before realizing, yet again, that he wasn't coming home. His bed remained untouched, his favorite toys gathering dust in the corner. The laughter that once filled their home had been replaced with an overwhelming silence, a void that could never be filled. Grief is not a linear process. Some days, Michael's mother found herself able to talk about her son with warmth, remembering his smile and the way he lit up a room. But then there were the darker days, the days when she was consumed with guilt, questioning everything. What if she had never married Merkel? What if she had noticed red flags sooner? What if she had done something, anything to stop this from happening? No mother should ever have to bury her child. No parent should ever have to wake up in the morning knowing they will never hear their child's laughter, never hold them close again, never tuck them into bed at night. But for Michael's family, this devastating reality was inescapable. Each morning, his mother opened her eyes to a home that no longer felt whole. The absence of her son was suffocating, a silence that echoed through the empty spaces where his laughter once filled the air. She still found herself listening for the sound of his small footsteps running through the house, for the way he used to call her name when he needed help with his toys or when he wanted just one more bedtime story. But that voice, that joy, had been ripped away in an instant. While Stephen Merkel sat in a jail cell awaiting his fate, Michael's mother knew that no amount of legal punishment could undo the damage that had been done. No prison sentence could erase the moment she found her son lifeless on the floor. No courtroom decision could take away the agonizing memories, the image of Michael's bright eyes dimming, the gut-wrenching wail that escaped her lips when she realized he was gone. Justice, she realized, would never truly be served in a way that mattered, because true justice would mean her son was still alive. And that was impossible. The world kept turning, but for Michael's family, time stood still. Each day without him was another reminder of everything he would never get to do. He would never get to ride his bike without training wheels, never have his first day of middle school, never learn to drive or graduate high school. The dreams he had, the adventures he would have gone on, all vanished the moment that gun was fired. But his mother refused to let Michael become just another statistic, just another news story that people would eventually forget. His name had to mean something. His story had to be a lesson, a warning of what can happen when responsibility is thrown aside, when firearms are treated carelessly, when one reckless mistake can destroy an entire family. The pain was unbearable, but she carried it with her every single day. The holidays were the hardest. She would catch herself picking up a toy he would have loved, holding it in her hands for a moment before the crushing realization set in. Michael wasn't here to open gifts anymore. His stocking would remain empty. His seat at the Thanksgiving table would stay untouched. Birthdays came and went, but there were no candles to blow out, no excited laughter as he tore through wrapping paper. Instead, there was only the heavy weight of grief, an unbearable ache in her chest, and the cruel passing of time that moved forward without him. Friends and family tried to offer comfort, but some wounds never heal. People told her she was strong, that she was brave. But she didn't feel strong. She felt broken, hollow, like a piece of her soul had been ripped away and could never be replaced. Despite the overwhelming pain, she knew she had to keep going. For Michael, for every child who deserved to be safe in their own home, for every mother who should never have to feel what she felt. The burden of grief became a mission, to make sure no other parent had to live through the nightmare that had become her reality. The weight of loss would never leave her. It wasn't something that faded with time. It was something she would carry for the rest of her life. Because when you lose a child, you don't just lose them in the moment. You lose them every day in a million different ways over and over again. Justice. What does it really mean? For some, it's about holding people accountable. Stephen D. Merkel Jr. has been charged with first-degree reckless homicide, and the legal process is underway. But no courtroom decision, no matter the outcome, can bring Michael back. Is justice just about punishment? Or is it about prevention? About making sure that what happened to Michael never happens to another child? This is where you come in. This isn't just a tragedy, it's a wake-up call, a warning. How many more innocent children have to die before reckless behavior is no longer excused as just a mistake? How many more families have to be shattered before we take gun safety seriously? Michael didn't get a second chance, but we have the chance to change things. Do you think justice will be served? Should laws be stricter to prevent tragedies like this? What more can be done to stop this from happening again? Comment below. Speak up, because silence allows history to repeat itself. Michael's story should not be forgotten. His tragic death serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers of negligent firearm use. What do you think should be done to prevent tragedies like this? Should there be stricter gun safety measures? Let's have this conversation, because silence only allows history to repeat itself. Michael, we will not forget you. Your story will be told. Your name will live on. Rest in peace, Michael Meager. You deserved so much more. Now, what do you think? Let's start a conversation. Let's make sure this never happens again. Comment below.